car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Hello, I'm Art Franklin. You are watching The Attorneys, and on this episode of The Attorneys, we are tackling an important topic for anyone in the workforce. We're talking about workers' compensation. And as always, attorneys at Hollis Wright, they are standing by throughout the show to answer your calls at 1-844-LAW-TALK. Again, that's 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free call, and it is also confidential. And the attorneys at Hollis Wright that we're going to hear from right now, these two guys sitting right next to me, of course, Carter Clay, and we got with us, Walt Cobb is joining us.
Yeah, Art, good to see you.
Good to see you as always.
Yeah, you know, we've covered workers' compensation a lot of times on this show, but we've done it in a way where we've really just kind of talked in generalities about workers' compensation, the rights of the employer, the rights of the employees. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach tonight. We've got a lot of viewer questions here by viewers that either personally or family members are experiencing some type of workers' compensation issue, some type of injury on the job, and they've got some very specific questions that they need help with. And I thought of no better person, other than Alwyn Horn maybe, than Walt Cobb to be on here. Walt Cobb is a member of our firm. He works with Alwyn Horn and our team of workers' compensation attorneys at Hollis Wright. Does a great job representing injured employees in the state of Alabama. So Walt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Now, Art, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been at Hollis Wright for a little while now, and my practice mainly consists of workers' compensation, so I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, well, let's jump right into it. We've got a good viewer question here right off the top that says, I hurt my leg while doing my job. I gave the doctor's bill to my boss, who told me that I have to pay it myself because he doesn't carry workers' compensation insurance. And I thought, or he thought, that all employers had to carry workers' compensation insurance. Talk about his situation a little bit.
So I'll say this first. You know, any employer that's non-agricultural in Alabama that is a private employer has to, if they have 5 or more employees, whether they be full-time or part-time, they have to carry workers' compensation insurance. And so for this gentleman, as long as his injury arose out of his work duty, then yes, the employer would be required to carry workers' comp as long as they have 5 or more employees.
Yeah, so that's really important because I guess there are a lot of small companies out there that routinely employ or consistently employ less than 5 employees, and would they just be exempt from workers' compensation insurance coverage? What would be the rights of an employee who is working for a small business that has less than 5 employees?
You know, sometimes they have other means of providing for an injured worker, but no, the Workers' Comp Act is very specific. It has to be a non-agricultural private employer, and they have to have 5 or more employees in order to, be under the act.
Yeah, and what I would also add or tell the viewer who asked that question is that there is this concept called the Employers Liability Act. Now, it's different than workers' comp because it's a fault-based statute, but it does oftentimes provide a remedy for injured employees who are employed by an employer who have less than 5 employees, and basically you would make a civil claim against that employer, but you'd have to prove that the employer did something wrong to cause or contribute to the injury, whereas workers' comp doesn't matter who was at fault. If you're injured on the job and they've got more than 5 employees and they've got workers' comp coverage, they're eligible for those benefits.
Correct.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about what benefits, if he is entitled to workers' comp coverage, what benefits would they be entitled to?
So under workers' compensation, there's 3 main different categories of benefits. You have your compensatory benefits, your medical benefits, and then in some cases, death benefits. So your compensatory benefits, if your injury arises out of the nature of your employment with your job, and let's say you're unable to work, the doctor has either taken you off of work or the doctor has given you certain restrictions that your employer, they can't handle, then you would be entitled to 2/3 of what you would normally make in a week, or what we would call your average weekly wage. That covers your compensatory. Your next category would be medical benefits. So if it is a compensable claim, all your medical benefits that are necessary for the treatment of your injury would be covered by your employer under the Act. Now, that includes your doctor's visits, your co-pays. It also includes mileage to and from the doctor. But a lot of times you have to be very particular how you take that down depending on the insurance company. And the third category would be death benefits. And so in some circumstances, if the death arose from an on-the-job injury and it is compensable, even if the employee passed away, their dependents could be entitled to damages or benefits.
Yeah. Do you have a question, Art?
I do. I want to jump into this one right here because this one caught my interest. My job requires a lot of heavy lifting. After I finished one of my shifts last week, my back and legs started hurting the next morning to the point where I couldn't stand. I still have a hard time moving. My job's insurance company told me they wouldn't send me to a doctor because my injury was not payable under workers' compensation. So what should I do?
So for that person, as long as his injury arose from his on-the-job duties, and again, it has to be compensable firsthand, he needs to, one, it sounds like he already reported that injury. Mm-hmm. And so if his employer has 5 or more employees and it is non-agricultural and it is a private business in Alabama, they would be required to carry workers' compensation. Now, you can be barred in certain instances from being able to recover under workers' compensation if that employer, if his injury didn't come from his on-the-job, duties, if he was, either intoxicated or was taking illegal illicit drugs, or in some cases, if he was doing something that would be, intentionally harmful to himself, then he would not be covered.
Yeah, and that's really a big issue in these workers' compensation cases, Art, is whether or not the injury actually arose from work-related activities or perhaps outside the job, especially with back injuries and things like that. If it's something that's not in an acute sort of immediate bring you to your knees type situation while you're lifting on the job, if you wake up the next morning and you've got back trouble, that could be a heavily litigated issue between your attorney and the employer in terms of whether or not it arises from the employment or not. But one of the aspects of that question that I wanted to circle back to you on, Walt, is who controls, if it is a compensable injury, who controls the doctors and therapists that you get to see or not see in a workers' compensation setting?
And so here's the catch with that. The doctor is picked by the insurance company. Your original doctor is picked by the workers' compensation. You don't get to choose that doctor that you go to. Whoever your employer sends you to, that's who you have to go with, that's who you have to treat with. If you go and get treatment on your own, it's not necessarily covered under the Act, and you could be barred if you go to get treatment on your own that's not through an approved doctor.
Yeah, now as I understand it, initially, unless it's like an emergency room setting, say for somebody who has a back injury, they may send them to a workers' compensation type doctor initially, and that's who their authorized treating physician is, correct?
Correct.
But then if that doctor says, look, you need to go see an orthopedic surgeon, and they refer the individual to that orthopedic surgeon then either becomes or also is an authorized treating physician, right?
That is correct. Yeah, as long as the original authorized treating physician refers you to somebody else. As long as it comes from that original authorized treating physician, then yes, it should be covered.
And then very briefly before we go to the break, what happens if the individual becomes dissatisfied with a doctor? Is there a mechanism or option that they have to choose a doctor?
And we see this. This happens, more often than you would think. If you don't like your doctor, yes, you can ask for what is called a panel of 4. Now that's where the workers' comp, they provide you with 4 new doctors, and you get to pick one doctor from that list. The catch with that is you only get one of those. And so let's say you pick another doctor from that panel, that is the doctor you now have.
Yeah.
You cannot request another panel once one has been selected.
So be careful when you opt for that panel of 4.
Absolutely.
It's like a pro already.
I know he is.
Set.
Yeah.
Good to have you with us, Walt, as we will coming up, continue this discussion on workers' compensation as we continue with the show. But want to remind you that those lawyers at Hollis Wright are standing by right now to take your call at 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free, confidential call there. So don't miss the chance to get a good lawyer to answer whatever question you may have. Make that call right now. We're going to take a break, continue with workers' compensation when we come back. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best: help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
At Hollis Wright, we don't make empty promises. So here's a promise you can bank on. If you've been injured in an accident and want tough, aggressive, and relentless representation that wins a lot, you'll get it at Hollis Wright, where your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. You got legal matters? Well, it matters to us. On this edition of The Attorneys, we are talking about workers' compensation, and we were getting into that topic right away, and Walt's an old veteran up here on the set. and Walt, I want to get to another viewer question here. This question says, I work in a factory that is very loud. I've noticed that I cannot hear as well as I did last year. Others who work with me tell me the same thing happened to them. Is this a case?
So this could possibly fall under what's called an occupational disease. And so an occupational disease that arises when someone is exposed to a, something harmful or, something that is particular to their occupation or job. And so we see this a lot in instances with, people that are working somewhere where they're breathing in hazardous chemicals every single day. And the big issue with that is you have to tie it back to, your workplace environment. But yes, that could be a case.
Yeah, and again, this is where these issues come up. I mean, it's a lot easier on Walt and Alwyn's team if somebody calls them and says, I fell from scaffolding on the job and I broke my leg and had surgery. Clearly that arises from employment, but when you get into these types of hearing loss issues and exposure to certain chemicals, it can become problematic. For instance, the example that Walt gave about being exposed to chemicals, now they've got lung and breathing problems, right? But they also smoke a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years, right? So these are the types of issues that Walt and Alwyn confront in these types of situations, and oftentimes they're heavily litigated. But I think the important part of all of this is to err on the side of contacting somebody like Walt or Alwyn to address those issues with them, let them research the issue, make a determination. It's free. They're not going to charge you for a consultation about that, and you need to err on the side of contacting a lawyer in order to protect your rights, because if you've got a valid claim, you need to pursue it.
Yeah. That's why we're getting into this discussion right now. And this is one, like you said, we've talked about before.
Yeah.
But we're taking a deeper dive into it.
Yeah, so here's another great question here. I was hurt on Friday afternoon at work and was taken straight to the doctor by my coworker. What should I do next? And I think the import of this question involves notifying and reporting.
Absolutely. If you get injured on the job, it doesn't matter, if it's on a Friday. The Workers' Compensation Act says that you need to report your injury within 5 days. However, you need to report it as soon as possible, and I can't express that enough. And so even if it's on a Friday afternoon, if they need to call a supervisor, if you work at a place that has a safety team, they need to contact that safety team, tell them about the injury, and tell them they're going to seek medical help. The Workers' Comp Act does have a fallback provision saying that you have to report it within 90 days if it's not within that original 5, but you need to report as soon as possible.
Now, when we talk about the employee reporting it, if the employer otherwise has notice of the incident or the injury to the employee, is that sufficient under the code, or does it have to be actually come from the employee?
So yeah, as long as the employer knows about the injury, that is fine. Usually they'll do a first report of injury or something like that. But the employee needs to make sure that they have reported this to the employer as quickly as they can.
Continue on with another question for you, Walter. We give you rapid fire here.
Yeah, bring them on. Yeah.
This question says, what can I do about earning money for my family if I can't go back to my old job because of my injury?
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like this person either has finished the workers' compensation claim and they're having trouble getting back to work, or they can't work. And so under the Workers' Compensation Act, if you have certain restrictions that a doctor has put on you, then you could be entitled to possibly vocational benefits or vocational retraining, where workers' comp would have to pay for this employee to be retrained for a new position or job. Or if that employee is injured to such a degree that they couldn't find any meaningful employment, then they could be entitled to permanent total disability payments under workers' compensation. Now, when you go down that route, a judge is going to have to make that determination on the permanent total. But they do have some rights, but yes, they need to contact an attorney.
Yeah, so you'll remember when Walt talked in the first segment about 2/3 of your average weekly wage, yes. And we call those temporary total disability benefits. That's the period of time after the incident where the individual cannot go back to work. However, at some point in the process, the employee will reach what we call maximum medical improvement, or MMI. Once that happens, the employee's 2/3 of their average weekly wage payments, they're going to be terminated. They're going to stop, because they then transition into what Walt was just referring to as the permanency side of the equation, and they will then be evaluated in terms of whether or not they've sustained a permanent partial disability, or PPD, or a permanent total disability, meaning that they can't go back to work at all. There are sort of complicated formulas that go into that equation in terms of determining what somebody's permanent injury is, but ultimately the case will be settled based on the permanency of that injury and or whether the person can go back to work. And I think, Walt, you would concur that permanency is what's going to ultimately drive sort of the lump sum value that an injured worker could receive based on the injury they sustained.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah. So we've got another question here. This is related to, my boss offered to settle my injury claim. Can I do this without hiring a lawyer?
So the short answer, yes, you can. You could accept a settlement without hiring a lawyer. However, I would advise against that. The best way to know what your rights are under the Workers' Compensation Act would be to hire somebody who is experienced with dealing with the Workers' Compensation Act. You have no way to know if your employer is giving you a fair value for what your injury is.
Yeah.
And so the best way to know that is to hire or talk to somebody who's familiar with the Act and is familiar with dealing with these kinds of situations.
Yeah, I mean, you can just hear when we talk about this subject, there are a lot of complexities and nuances to the Workers' Compensation Act. The worst thing that a worker could do, I think, especially injury on the job, is to settle their workers' compensation claim without hiring a lawyer, because there are lifetime consequences and lifetime ramifications potentially to doing that, and we'll probably unpack that a little bit further after the break.
Which is exactly why Hollis Wright has lawyers standing by right now, right?
Do.
Exactly why you can do that. And we give you this number, is 1-844-LAW-TALK, 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. They're standing by. That call is free. That call is confidential. You think you have a question, go ahead and make that call. We'll take a break. We'll continue with workers' compensation when we come back.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
Did you know when you have to take a case all the way to trial, there is almost always insurance involved? Don't take on large insurance companies on your own. Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. We invite you to join Hollis Wright on all the social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter, of course. Join us there and like us, share, and follow us on those. We also want to remind you, there are a couple of numbers scrolling on the bottom of your screen. You can use those numbers to send a text to Hollis Wright, because we make it easy for you to get in contact with the law firm, or call 1-844-LAW-TALK. There's also a QR code on the screen. Go ahead and scan that. That'll take you to Hollis Wright as well. Our discussion today is workers' compensation. More to deal with.
Absolutely. Walt, I want to expound upon the question that we just covered about why you don't want to settle your workers' compensation claim without talking to a lawyer. And one of the areas that I think is critically important to an injured worker are the medical benefits. Talk a little bit about those medical benefits. Are they limited in time, meaning after 5 years you lose those benefits? Are they lifetime medical benefits? How does that work?
And that's a great question. And so under the Workers' Compensation Act, you have lifetime medical benefits as it relates to that injury. And so the problem with someone trying to settle this claim is a lot of times the employer may try to get you to sign away those future medical benefits, which you are entitled to under the law. And sometimes those future medical benefits, they can have pretty high values, and you have no idea if you're signing those away unless you contact an attorney.
Yeah, and just to give you an example, if you've got a 25 or 30-year-old male that was involved in heavy lifting and they hurt their back on the job, it's been accepted as an on-the-job injury, and they have surgery, those lifetime medical benefits have significant value. The insurance company would like nothing more than to get those off their books by settling those future medical benefits. And while it may be appropriate in certain circumstances to settle those medical benefits, you need to talk to a lawyer, because somebody like you or Alwyn or Emily in our office, they're going to have an idea as to what that value is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Art, do we have any other questions from the viewers?
I want to talk about this factoid. And you may have noticed on your screen, we from time to time put up valuable information about the topic that we're discussing on the show. This one is one that says, generally, if an injured worker does not see a doctor approved by the employer will not be responsible for payment for that treatment. Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, and that is absolutely correct. And so the physician that you see, it has to be an authorized treating physician through the workers' compensation insurance. If you seek your own medical attention, it may not be covered. And so under the Act, they are allowed, the insurance company is allowed to pick the doctor, and you must see that doctor. And that's the only way to ensure that those visits are going to be covered and that treatment is going to be covered.
Yeah. Another question here, and I guess this person is on Social Security disability, maybe related to an on-the-job injury, but it says, can I draw Social Security benefits and workers' compensation benefits at the same time?
The short answer to that is yes. To unpack that a little bit more, if you qualify for both workers' compensation and for Social Security disability, yes, you can apply for both of them. However, sometimes with Social Security, Your benefits may be reduced slightly depending on what's going on with your Workers' Compensation Act, your Workers' Compensation case. But yes, if you qualify for both of those, you can apply and receive both.
Yeah, and this is one interesting area, and this question made me think of this situation where workers have to be careful, and that is the question of, can I receive unemployment benefits while at the same time taking the position that I am permanently and totally disabled from a workers' compensation injury? Right. That is a problem. And the answer to that is no, and that is going to get you in trouble, and it may result in you being precluded from getting permanent total disability payments. And the reason for that is one of the requirements for getting unemployment benefits is what? Ready, willing, and able to go back to work. And I have seen situations in the past where individuals who were hurt on the job, they went and they got unemployment benefits and were on unemployment benefits, and all of a sudden, at some point down the road, they wanted to claim they were permanently and totally disabled. It did not go very well for them. So that's something that the viewers definitely need to keep in mind.
Keeping you informed, and this is one I just want to talk about just for a second here. Do I get to keep my family's health insurance even though I am unable to go back to work after my injury?
And so it depends on what the employer's health insurance plan says. And so every single health insurance plan is going to be a little bit different. If you are receiving health insurance for you and your family through your employer and you get injured, yes, they will still need to provide those. However, if you are paying your premiums out of your paycheck every week or month, then you will continue to have to pay those in order to continue to be covered. And so, we see this happen a lot. And if you're not able to work, obviously you can't continue to pay for those, those premiums. And so you do have to end up getting other insurance or going on COBRA or something like that that can cause a financial strain on somebody.
Yeah, I think we've probably got time for one more question, and I know you see this a lot, which is that what happens if an injured worker cannot get a doctor's visit approved, or he's not getting mileage reimbursement? Like, what are they supposed to do at that point in time?
So at that point, if that's going on, they need to talk to a lawyer. They need to call somebody. They need to, get some advice from an attorney, because that may be a situation where the attorney, whoever they hire, will need to, file something with the court to make sure that that person is receiving the medical attention that they need and that they're getting the benefits they deserve under the Act.
Yeah, what they can do is they can file a motion to enforce those medical benefits, a motion to compel them to pay mileage reimbursement, get it before the court, have a hearing, and the court would likely approve those benefits.
Well, it's been good. It's been really good.
Great, yeah. It's done a great job.
It went by faster than we expected it. That's about all the time we have for this episode of The Attorneys. We continue to listen to you, of course, at 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can reach an attorney at Hollis, Wright, right there. We're so glad you joined us for this episode, and we invite you to go ahead, make an appointment, put it on your schedule, on your calendar, to join us again next week for another edition of The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis, Wright.